Thank you very much for that. And yes, I do have Mr. Anand Mahindra joining us right here in Davos. Thanks very much. I think global growth, opinions all get shaped here in Davos, it seems. The IMF's latest forecast downgrades global growth but is bullish on India and believes India has the potential to pick up. A, is that a view you share? And B, India for very long, and for a business like yours, it's good, has been a one engine economy, largely driven by consumption. Will we finally see that virtuous cycle of consumption and investment be set in motion this year?
Talking about the IMF, first of all, I can't comment on their downgrade of global growth. Yes, there's a lot of pessimism here in Davos, but I'm at the same time hearing opinions from people saying some of that pessimism is overdone. Because there have been a lot of small crises that are preventing or clouding the future, if I may say, whether it's Brexit or it's the shutdown, the trade wars. The underlying optimism still exists, even in global businessmen. That's what I've learned in the last 2 days. As far as India, of course, I agree with the IMF that it's time to be bullish on India. A lot of the hiccups that we've experienced in the last, some to do with structural policy reforms, are now behind us. It's time to leverage on these reforms. Many of the policies that have been put in place are now going to bear fruit in India. So we were disappointed that last year the festival season didn't really live up to expectations, but I'm hopeful that in the next few months we're going to see a strong revival in consumption. Coming back to your point about consumption versus investment, you know, I think we have had investment. In fact, one of the things that's kept the Indian economy strong, despite softness in consumption, was investment in infrastructure. Mr. Gadkari, for example, is unstoppable, kept investing in variety of projects. I can give you a simple indicator. We make construction equipment too, backhoe loaders. And those were down for quite a while, but when the government, it picked up for the last year and 18 months, which is a very clear indication that ground has been broken in many, many new projects.
So when do we see the big investments start breaking ground? You're right. I think the early shoots of revival are there. The gross fixed capital formation, all those numbers are going up. Because I think a lot of people will point out that back home in India, the big event is the budget, and that big event is the election, and that kind of adds to the uncertainty. Do you believe the momentum will continue, or is that going to be an uncertain input?
I'll have to be realistic that we cannot expect substantial investment in major projects to happen before the elections.
True.
They will be on hold for a while. And the elections, if anything, will spur consumption again.
True.
So that will be the quantitative easing, if you will, that should help the economy. But once you have a new government in place, I don't think any new government, whatever its composition, is going to have any choice but to invest substantially if we are going to get the economy to grow beyond 7.5%, which is the projection.
No, it's interesting to actually hear from you that whatever the political establishment, the reform trajectory is here to stay. And I think I want to just move away from economy and talk about pure polity. Of course, laced with economic reforms. The Modi government completes a 5-year term in office. You're a very keen watcher of the Indian economy. You see what's happening vis-a-vis the world. How would you assess the 5-year performance? What have been the big hits and some of the misses that you wish weren't there or wish could have been done a lot?
You know, Supriya, I'm never really somebody who likes to go into scorecards and so on. I find them futile exercises. I believe that the India story is something that is unstoppable. Regardless of who is in power, the demographics, we've talked about all of this before. Just to make things anecdotal, I have a nephew who's half Belgian and half Indian. Is in the US in university, and he came here on holiday 2 weeks ago, and he said, you know, India is the place to be. And this guy is from United World College, Ivy League colleges now. The world is his oyster. And I said, you really believe that? And he said, look around. He said, look at the chaos around the world. Look at the political instability. Look at the demographics. Look at the potential, and look what's going on. He said, you come here. There's so much action going on. He said, I don't think there's any other place to be in the world. So, as they say, out of the mouths of babes, sometimes we can analyze and drive ourselves into paralysis. Whatever has happened in the last 5 years hasn't done anything except to enhance the India story.
Fair point indeed. But you know, Mr. Mahindra, as we head into an election, there is a lot of buzz that this could throw up a fractured mandate. Are you somebody who's wary of that, or do you believe coalitions or strong governments will continue the reform trajectory? There have been reforms even in a coalition government.
A fractured coalition. Somehow sounds familiar, doesn't it? Been there, done that. And what I've been
And we
telling-
survived it.
And so that's the point I was telling people, that I was having a very interesting chat with the head of a multinational bank last night. And I said, you know, when you look around at what's happening around the world, what's India's biggest question mark? That we may have a fractured coalition. Nobody's questioning will the democratic process be derailed. Nobody's questioning will the elections be secure. Nobody's asking whether the democratic process is going to be subverted. Is there going to be chaos in the street? Will there be yellow-jacketed people striking everywhere?
yes.
India is, in fact, just going through a very normal electoral process. And we've had coalitions before. And I believe right now the whole process of reform, every government, any government that comes in knows that its survival depends on development.
Will we see creative incrementalism, though, as far as our reform process is concerned? I mean, a government with a brute majority did IBC, they did GST, they could do targeted inflation, but this and a lot more needs to be done. Is creative incrementalism, I think, a phrase that Arvind Subramanian coined, here to stay? And has stigmatized capitalism taken a toll on our reform process? It could have been far more robust.
Sounds like that's a topic for a thesis. I don't know how much time we have for the interview, but I love the phrase creative incrementalism. And it's such a wonderful phrase that I have no quarrel with it anyway, as long as it's creative and it's incremental. So when you put the two together, it's not creative reductionism. So as long as we are moving in one direction, sometimes it is a good strategy to hasten slowly, as they say, depending on what happens. When you try to move too fast sometimes, well, then you encounter problems like President Macron is encountering.
Yes.
So who's knocking creative incrementalism? I think that's fine. And the stigmatization of capitalism, that is unfortunate global. As you know, a very senior multinational executive is languishing in a jail in Japan as we speak.
Yes.
So I think as a community, we have to be very, very careful. And we must ensure that governance remains at the core of what we do. Otherwise, yes, there is a global risk of stigmatizing capitalism.
Are economic reforms hard to sell politically?
I think that's by definition, isn't it? Unless there's been some new
Good
wisdom
economics
that I didn't
and
know
bad
about.
politics and all of that.
I don't think it's easy. Let me put it this way. I think it's becoming easier. I believe people are beginning to see the correlation between strong reform and between happier, good economic outcomes in their personal lives. That divide is not so strong. But having said that, it's always going to be difficult to push reforms politically. But you need creative people and sometimes creative incrementalism, knowing how to pace yourself
To push it in the right
to push it
direction.
in the right direction.
So a quick last question. A union budget is right around the corner and there's plenty of speculation that this could perhaps bring in an agri-relief package for a sector that's in pain, a sector that you have a lot of exposure to. Do you believe that's the answer to India's agrarian stress, an agri-relief package? I'm glad in a way that at least it's moving away from the discussions on a blanket loan waiver.
Agri-relief, that's a broad umbrella term. Does
An
agriculture...
assured income, 10,000 per family.
So does agriculture need relief? Yes. What is the nature of relief? There's a very constructive and healthy debate going on. People have understood that simply higher MSPs are not the answer. Bank loan waivers are not the answer. People understand that what has been done in Telangana, what has been done in Orissa are the models. So we have our own homegrown models. We've got people like Gulati who've been writing on this for a long time, giving assured incomes, as you said, per stipends, and ensuring that tenant farmers get those stipends is an answer which I hope will be adopted as opposed to pure MSP increases or loan waivers.
As Anand Mahindra, one of the tallest captains of Indian industry, do you lose sleep over India's institutional framework? There is a lot of criticism that some of the institutional independence has been criticized, and case in point could be the Supreme Court or the RBI.
First of all, and thank you for that compliment, but as you know, I'm not somebody of startling height, as you can make out. But no, I don't worry about our institutional frameworks. I think if you look at our history without citing any kinds, without even having to cite any instances, in India, whenever we move too far from our democratic core, from our checks and balances, we always move back to the center. Somehow in our
Things fall
country,
in place.
things fall in place. People never allow boundaries to be crossed, which is why I love the country and I'm still there.
And which is why we love chatting with you. Thanks very much, Mr. Mahindra, to be in conversation with us. That's Anand Mahindra talking to us right here in Davos at the World Economic Forum, from polity to economy to economic reforms and all of that and many more.